Yes. But all right, so let's get this party started, shall we? All right, so I'm gonna go with Tim's idea because Tim had a good idea, and we should get started by just first of all just going over who we are and that kind of stuff as a kind of an origin story for the show. So welcome, you four or you three.
Thank you for having me.
Yeah, welcome you three to the first episode / first volume / first whatever else of American Lunchbox. So what's on the menu for today? All right, Tim, you take it away, bro.
Oh, what's on the menu? Oh, well, it's information that's hard to swallow. How's that? All right. Well, I think let's start off with some softball questions. You know, before we really get into the world. Let's why don't we just go around the room, kind of introduce ourselves, talk about who we are, what our backgrounds are. We don't have to get into specific details because I know we had a big conversation about privacy and what have you. But my name is Tim. Haven't decided. I don't know what's on the Skype call there. If it's Tim R, Tim T, Tim something or another, but it's Tim. But yeah, so I know all three of these guys, Richard, George, and Chris. For many years, we've worked together in the entertainment industry.
I'm going by Carlos in this podcast, Tim.
Okay. Okay, Carlos.
Nah, Chris is fine. Changed it back.
Yeah.
But yeah, we all got together. We chit chat every once in a while about things, and we decided, hey, let's go ahead and make a podcast about what we feel, how we think, and what's going on in the world. But I think the easy softball question. Let's just go around the room and talk about COVID and talk about quarantine and what are our thoughts on it? What are our frustrations with it so far? I can say right now, for myself, I live with three individuals who have underlying health conditions, so it doesn't allow me to go out or do a lot of things. I have a little bit more of a tolerance. I'm willing to go out and do a few things, but you know, I'm cautious. I wear a mask around the neighborhood when I go bike rides, but I still have to be cautious that I don't bring it back into the home. But yeah, it gets a little frustrating. It gets a little old because you know, I'm not used to spending this much time in the house. To be honest, I'm usually working 8-12 hours a day, so I'm usually I work the overnight shift, so I do a lot of sleeping most of the time during the day. So having to spend a lot of time in the house is just I love my family. Don't get me wrong, but it gets a little bit on you from time to time.
Tim, like you're married. Let's move forward.
All right, fine. Exactly. So, Chris, I know that you like to go out and go on bike rides or whatever. What's been your experience with COVID? I know you live out in certain areas that don't wear a lot of masks.
It's been interesting and frustrating and a little lonely. I mean, I live out on the beach, and the bike trail has been closed on and off. And right now it's 4th of July, and the beach is closed. I don't know what that means. I hear people shooting off fireworks all the time. I imagine that going out today would be somewhat of a mess between people who don't care and are shooting them off and cops who are telling people to shoo off. But mostly going out there has been like lifeguards telling you to back off or get off the beach. And I mean, I guess you wouldn't have to listen, but you kind of just get annoyed enough that you get away. It's a little frustrating because the beach is so big here. The sand is so big. It's the perfect place for distancing. But in terms of like the bike trail, they made it for a while where if you ride for 2, 3, 4 minutes, then you get to a giant sand pile. Like they covered the trail with sand piles to dissuade exercise. On Memorial Day, they let you post up, but they were going to hassle every group of people who was on the beach to say, hey, you can't have that umbrella. So I understand that COVID is a health concern, but skin cancer is as well, and some of this is silly.
What are they doing with all the homeless people? I mean, how they
no, they're just running wild. It's just I saw 4 of them shoulder to shoulder talking about COVID. Sitting in front of someone's house.
Did you hear about what the mayor?
They're just on the boardwalk still because they're not going to listen, or there's nowhere for them to go.
Did you hear what the mayor proposed to them? They're giving them free hotel rooms, and none of them are taken.
Well, that's what's happened in New York, and it's been a bit of a controversial situation where the local communities don't want their local hotel turned into a homeless shelter. Mm-hmm. Activist groups that come and then say that the local community is bigoted, and all the while there's someone making money off of all of this because there's kickbacks between what I imagine is the mayor's friends.
Yeah.
Absolutely. That idea definitely came from some type of economic perspectives, because why not have a hotel with all the rooms filled while we're in COVID? Well, that sounds like if I owned a hotel
right,
where people weren't traveling, and we know people aren't traveling, but how can I guarantee that all of my rooms will be filled and I'll get a check from the government? That sounds like a great idea to me.
Well, you had that.
Yeah, that's County. The sick. Sorry, go on, Tim.
Yeah, well, you had that in Orange County where there was a hotel where the government arranged to put a bunch of homeless people in there, or put a bunch of people with COVID. But then you had people across the street, a bunch of rich a-holes who were sitting there complaining about it, going, "Oh, not in my backyard. I don't want this. It's too close to a senior center or whatever." And I mean, I get it. I get for the health concern, but it's like everybody wants it, but it's like they don't want it in their backyard. It's kind of like prisons.
Yeah, and it's definitely an industry. Like in Santa Monica, there was a local paper that wrote. I might be getting the numbers slightly wrong, but there was this woman was making about $11,000 a month to figure it out. The whole program spent about $20+ million, and I think over that course of a year or two, they housed 60 people. So when you see that's happening, it's not curing the homelessness situation. There's people making money off of it, a lot of money off of it, and the one thing that's been very frustrating to see is that in this year of 2020, where we could see that the government can move mountains when they want to, it seems that no one wants to solve this problem.
But I was going to touch on that, where I saw the homeless people where they were offering them free hotel rooms, but they don't want to stay there because they have to follow rules.
Oh yeah, the guy in my backyard.
That's the problem.
He said he won't go to a shelter because he can't do drugs and alcohol in a shelter.
Yeah. So that's not homelessness. That's something.
Well, and
right. It's not a housing crisis. Sorry.
Yeah,
But also let's be mindful. It's not illegal to do drugs. It's not illegal to drink alcohol. So it's just that when you're dealing with a certain population that is infamous for abusing it, they get treated a certain kind of way because they're abusing it, and they get mad when someone calls them out for abusing it, and now you have all these restrictions. But if they take responsibility for their usage of these things, then things will be different, I believe. The politics, they can't speak for the whole culture because it's a culture of homeless people. This is a whole culture now. They have their own language. They have their own way of doing things. They have their own. It's a whole culture, and that's how you have to treat it.
But hard drugs are illegal. The sale of hard drugs are illegal. Drinking outside is illegal. So loitering is illegal. So all the things are illegality. They're just not being policed. And where are you going to do? Where are you going to shuffle them? There's just not enough shelters. Like New York has just as many homeless as us, but there's enough shelters to handle it. But here, they're just all out on the beach and the street.
The media perceives it as people are losing their jobs and going on the street. No, these guys have been on the street for years, and they don't want help.
Right, it's the hierarchy of needs. If you go fall on hard times and become homeless, your brain goes into overdrive, and you don't stay homeless for long. So the drugs suppress that basic need of shelter. It's fucked up.
But these guys have been on drugs for a while,
That guy in my backyard, he looks about 60, or that was there. I hope he's okay. Yeah. He's about 40. He's about 40. He's not 60. It's really bad.
Well, I've heard other theories about homeless and requiring people to stay clean if you're in a shelter or if you're in any kind of assisted living. And, there's some pros and cons to that. I mean, I get it, but it's at the same time, having them off the street is probably a better thing because you get an address, you get a way to stay clean, you get, other things. And to sit there and say, okay, you have to stay clean, you have to stay, drug and alcohol free, it's kind of hard too because these people have a problem. And maybe having, counseling or having some kind of drug treatment program associated with that as well is a better thing in the long run. I don't like the idea of people getting a free ride and getting free shelter when I've got to sit there and work for it. But in the long run for a society, maybe that's a better thing.
Well, that's the concern, right? Like on a very just like I'm fine with anyone using drugs as long as it didn't affect another person. But if you have a situation, I'm going to paint the most stereotypical situation, but if you have a situation where little Susie's trying to get to the library to get her book, and then there's a homeless man outside cracked out with his pants down, little Susie's not going to the library. And in the long run, little Susie's a better potential investment in society than guy who might not ever get off crack.
And also,
Richard, while you're talking, go ahead and introduce yourself too.
Oh, my name is Rich. I worked with these guys for about, I don't know, years. And it came into a friendship. And we all have different ideas, and but we're cordial and we can express our ideas without arguing or fighting.
Or
which
killing each other.
We're not one-sided thinkers. We think outside the box.
Love.
Which I think needs to be more preached about these days. So I feel the media is either one side or the other. It's never, nobody.
We're thinking outside the lunchbox.
Nobody reports the news anymore. They give me their opinion.
It's so true. Like I listened to Trump's Mount Rushmore speech. Which was actually he was on pretty good behavior, and it was a pretty well written speech, which is great. But before that, I saw a headline on CNN from that Brian Seltzer guy saying, "You're going to be confused by what you're about to hear." How the fuck do you know? How do you know? The news is written before it happens. Yeah. So I like to call balls and strikes, and I like to give credit where it's due and criticism where it's due. And I like to wait to see the end result before I emotionally invest in anything. Mm-hmm. That's just me. My name's Chris, by the way.
Yeah.
Yes. And Mount Rushmore is full of slave owners, by the way.
Yep.
But aside,
so are the graveyards in communist Russia.
Absolutely, but we don't put those on mountains either here in the United States.
Oh, did you also hear what happened yesterday at Mount Rushmore?
What happened?
The Native Americans were protesting as well.
Really?
Did hear about that?
Because the Native Americans have something to talk about too.
No, because they felt like they didn't like the message that was being talked about, and it's like you said, slave owners, and they've been oppressed as well.
Absolutely.
It's still to this day, and they're like, this is our land, and you're coming on our land trying to have a 4th of July party. And that's what they were upset.
Listen, 4th of July is a very controversial.
Is it?
It is. It is a very controversial. Now, let me be clear. First of all, my name is Battle, and I'm going to go by Battle on this particular. That is my last name, for those of you all wondering. I just didn't make that up.
That was your street name.
That's my that's my OG set name.
Yeah. And we're the battle bots.
Yeah. Right now, the battle bots. But as far as the controversial part of 4th of July, in my culture, Black culture of this country, we've always believed, and we always knew, because history has shown us, that we didn't celebrate the 4th of July. Mm-hmm. We didn't celebrate the 4th of July during the time of that, even though we did, of course, share in the bloodshed, even though we were a part of that revolution. We did not benefit, except for the fact that we went right back to doing what we were doing the day afterwards, and that was being enslaved. So therefore, when we look at American holidays, we have to be extremely careful that we are sensitive as well as inclusive, but we have to be sensitive to it. Now, do I have a problem cooking a good steak on the grill and frying some chicken and putting some? No, I mean, I enjoy the day off. Don't get me wrong, and I want my children and everyone to benefit from the day. But we have to understand where these holidays have come from, and we have to pay homage to every part of it. We just can't pay homage to the revolution without paying homage to the people who fought in the revolution. We can't pay homage to the day and then forget the day afterwards, which was July 5th, and every day thereafter, up until the fact that Black people, obviously in this country, were quote unquote free.
But this might not have to do with the fact that there was an American Revolution, but the documents of the Constitution, the wording in it, although it wasn't actuated at the time, like, wouldn't you say that set the clock ticking on the death knell of slavery? Like, in the grander scheme of human history, there were thousands of years of slavery, and slavery ended 75 years or so after the American Revolution, because there was things written in the Constitution that led the abolitionists to pursue ending it. And not only that,
absolutely,
it was a deal. It was a deal with the devil that the North had to make with the South at the time, and that they wanted to get rid of it. Some people, not everyone, some people wanted to get rid of it, but they had to get Britain out of the way. They had to lock in stone something that locked that in stone for the time being, while the wording of it
Hamilton
kind of implied that they wanted to get rid of it in a long run.
Hamilton, Jefferson, and Madison. No one was in the room except for them when they made that deal. It was their deal for the South and their deal for the North. So I understand what you're saying, and I get it, but the realities are still the same. It didn't end, and yes, from that point forward, slaves were considered 3/5 of a human. That was it. That was in the Constitution. It's written because they wanted representation. There was more people in the South, so they wanted. Well, the North didn't want them to claim all those people. So what did they do? So the North said, "We'll make the slaves, Black people, 3/5 of a human, so that when you count up, they won't be considered a whole human, but 3/5 of a human." This was
right. But abolition and then civil rights were all reforms.
Still there, by the way.
They were all reforms. So, like,
no,
there was things writing that stuff out of the Constitution or nullifying those parts of it.
No, I'm talking about July 5th. I'm talking about on July 5th.
1776?
Yeah, I'm talking about after we won, after we started the reconstruction of putting this country back together. I'm saying this happened in synchronicity. These things happened in a way that led up to, and I get it, you're right. Years later, we took the words to its full meaning for everyone. I get it. But at the time when it was being developed, they had no incentives. They had no idea that Blacks, women, for that matter, or any immigrant, other than white men, would benefit from this.
Yeah, pretty much.
You know what? It's just such a different experience. Like, my family's like basically Ellis Island people, or that sort of crop of immigrants that came up. So we got here after all that. Like, the history for us of this country was there's a better opportunity here than dealing with your local shitty town that you currently live in. And we came here, or I'm saying we ancestors came here and saw that was in a lot of ways completely true. But the Native American and Black populations don't have that exact experience.
And they've been lied to,
Your family chose to come here as immigrants. You got the label of an immigrant. We got the label of a slave.
Yeah,
true.
That's it. So one is a choice and one is not.
But would you want to go? I mean, this is a stupid question. Everyone says it, but I mean, for even with all the problems here, I would not want my family to go back to Sicily or wherever. Like, it's nice there, but I'm not trying to live there forever.
Right. What was that? What was the bill that?
Maybe if I get exiled, I'll go chill there for a while.
What did Abraham Lincoln sign? Emancipation Proclamation?
Yeah, that only was, again, a war tactic. It was a war tactic. And it was slaves south of Potomac. So what did they do? What did the slaves do? And the North knew that they were going to do it. So all the slaves from the South ran to the North to be free. And as a consequence, joined the army and fought in now what would be the Civil War. So it's all political. It's all political. And remember, Lincoln, even though he despised slavery internally, but politically, he is known for saying the words, "I am neither for nor against slavery."
Yeah.
He also defended a slave owner as a lawyer, and he also
Yes,
he
exactly.
also
It was an economic reality.
there was a lot of and he also didn't free the slaves in certain places with the Emancipation Proclamation, right?
It was only north of the Potomac. That means
Right.
all of the North states. So all of the Southern slaves.
Wait. So was Abraham Lincoln the first virtue signaler by doing that move?
That's it. He was.
But were all the slaves promised like a piece of land?
No,
right?
That was during the Reconstruction period of this country.
Yeah.
And when that time, there were people who, because remember, if you look back at history during Reconstruction, there were black mayors, there were black senators, people took office. There were educated black people.
Yeah, it was like a window before Jim Crow or something, right?
Window before Jim Crow. Very good. Exactly. And therefore, what happened is that during that time, blacks were able to speak for themselves and felt like, and as we do today, that because of the years of slavery for at least over 23 generations, if you count them up, not including the deaths, but at least over 23 generations of free labor, that we, much like everyone else on the planet, deserve something for our cause.
Correct.
And black people, right, said, give us what they call 20 acres and a mule. That was before the whole move to West, right? That was before California. That was before Nevada. So we knew that we were going to be moving west. So this country said, let's talk about it. And they debated it, and it went back and forth. But then, of course, what happened? People start feeling like, wait, if they are the majority in numbers, if they get any kind of political or financial or where they have actual free cap, they could control the country. And that
Can't have that.
narrative and people all of a sudden said, wait a minute. And that's when we saw racism for the first time in this country, because there was no racism during slavery, because they were slaves. There was nothing to be racist about. We can call
it was just property, yeah.
Yeah, but racism came after Reconstruction. And that's when you have the North and the South working together with slavery. Because in the North, what happened is that white people in the North didn't want to work directly with them. They didn't want to work. Then that's when the unions started. And the unions worked very hard to make sure that they separated themselves in the workplace from black people. That's why during that time, you see white workers and black workers. This was in the North. And in the South, we had the Jim Crow. The Jim Crow laws that said that black people couldn't go to school, and they could go to school. They couldn't go to school, but they couldn't do certain things. They couldn't spit on the ground and stupid shit like that, or they couldn't group themselves, or they had all of this silly stuff. And there's a whole list of them. I grew up in Virginia. That's where I'm originally from, and I know about Jim Crow. Even as a man of this generation, I still know about Jim Crow laws, even in Virginia. And there is a railroad track, literally, that separated the city, and black folks lived over there and white folks lived over here.
I think the current issue, though, and the current turmoil we're seeing is that there's a group of people that wants to throw out the foundational principles of the country because of all the stuff you mentioned, and they're more opting for revolution instead of reform. The problem I have with that is that regardless of all the scabs for which you just talked about, the foundational principles of the country are pretty good.
They are.
And my concern with what's currently going on is that people are willing to throw the baby out with the bathwater, and they're doing so because of the weaknesses of the country, the racism and that sort of stuff. But the problem is, if the revolutionary people that are currently running around grabbing at statues get what they want, I don't know if their principles are better than ours. Revolution's only as good as its principles, and regardless of the fact that slavery still existed in the world at that time, the American principles, the American Revolution principles, are probably some of the best of any popular revolution that's happened on Earth.
I agree.
I still feel like we're reaping the repercussions, the decisions made 200, 300 years ago, you know? They want to keep the African American down, you know? If you would have just given that little piece of land, whatever, we probably wouldn't be in this mess, you know?
Maybe so.
Well,
but
it's
Not to say that, yeah, but I'm just saying you can't just keep on keeping somebody down, not give them anything. This is what happens.
Well, it's kind of why Nixon was, even though Nixon wasn't like gung-ho civil rights, that he was willing to play somewhat ball because he said, well, we have an adversary in the Cold War. That adversary is going to pick on our weakness. So that cultural revolution was harder to hit America because other places had kings and rulers and despots and local warlords. And those revolutionaries came in and said, hey, don't you want the people to govern the people? Well, we know that turned out to be a fucking lie. But it was very seducing at the time because, I mean, if the king's going to just rule us anyway, we're just treating like crap anyway. Yeah, let's kill the king and we'll see what the future holds. Harder to do that with America because we have so many individual rights and freedoms. The problem with not living up to that is that that's a weakness that could be exploited on by these people. So it's no surprise that the very real problem of racial justice that still needs to be addressed continually is being infused or hijacked by people who have their own political aims and don't really give a shit that George Floyd got killed. Mm-hmm. But they're happy enough to use it to get what they want.
Correct.
Opportunists. And you, Chris, you're absolutely right. If the words of the Constitution were lived up by the letter and the spirit, we wouldn't have a problem. We wouldn't have a problem. There would be no reason to amend things. If the word for everyone meant for everyone, then we'd be in good shape. I'm a firm believer that if any country, and I'm going to say this because I know that there are new countries out there because we just liberated one over the last 10 years, supposedly. Yeah. We were over there in Afghanistan and all that stuff. We just liberated countries, right?
They feel so liberated. It feels so liberating to be there, I'm sure.
We're just liberated. But I know, though, that the reality is that any new country, after any new revolution, whether it be here or there, would use the Constitution as a model. Because it's the best one. It's the best one out there. You're not going to. You're going to use it, even though you may not choose to use the same word, but you're going to definitely use the word Constitution. You're going to definitely use the word amendment. You're going to definitely use that model as a way of dictating. So I agree with you, Chris.
Sorry, go on.
No, I agree with you. I think, but the problem is when you put, the status quo, which is, middle, white, Anglo-Saxon, Protestant men in control of it, they're more concerned about obviously their legacy, their history, and their money.
Of course.
Is there a way to so if the execution is the bad part and the execution is so widespread that it's in some ways real and maybe some ways perceived that it's systematic, is there a way to commit surgery on this country in a way that preserves the foundational principles and good cultural heritage, but that also exercises the negatives?
Absolutely. With any advance in the culture, there has to be revolution of some type. It has to be. But what does the word revolution mean? Revolution means change.
I think a revolution is like an overthrow is the way that these people are talking about it.
No, not necessarily.
Well, it is though.
Well,
the movement of people is not talking about that, but the group controlling the Black Lives Matter movement is definitely talking about stuff like that.
It's not, but it's.
And the Antifa types are definitely talking about that.
But at its core, revolution is just change, as far as I'm concerned. Now, how you go about change is the issue that I'm talking about, and that's what I'm speaking to. And the only way, and I know this is going to sound terrible, but the only way to right a wrong is to all recognize that something is wrong. Mm-hmm. But we all have to say this is wrong. And that's when we start putting feet to the fire, rubber to the road. And we start saying, if we all agree that this is wrong, then now we can work together at finding a solution. And that's revolution, as far as I'm concerned.
Are you guys seeing, sorry to interrupt, are you guys seeing George? His video is cut on my end.
I see him.
Yeah,
Oh, okay.
I see him, but I can't see him moving.
He's a little backlit, but he's fine.
No, he's stuck in the
Is his
frame.
mouth moving for you though?
Yeah.
No, not for
Oh,
me.
okay.
I
As
know.
long as Tim's got it. Sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt.
George, can you talk?
Yes,
Yeah,
yes.
I
I'm
can
here.
hear you. All right.
Okay. Good. Can you see him though, Tim?
Yeah, I can see him fine.
Oh, okay. Sorry about that.
That's all right.
Okay, so
Getting back to that.
But
The problem is agreeing on what is wrong and what to do with it. And America hasn't really had a great track record of always agreeing on things. Like I definitely see the idea of tearing down these statues and of Confederate leaders. I was sitting there shocked. I was sitting there researching, and I go, why do we have these Confederate?
they belong in museums.
It's revisionist history. It
does belong in a museum.
It belongs
but
in a museum.
it doesn't deserve to be torn down and
no, and I don't
like
agree
that.
with that.
That's kind of shitty too.
It is, but it's been something that's been.
Or maybe
going
it
on
does
for a long
deserve
time.
that, but the visuals are kind of bad.
Right.
Yeah.
Well, yeah. I mean, it's civil disobedience, but I mean, it's been something that's been going on for a long time. It's something that people have complained about for a long time, and I think, okay, this all kind of came to a head with George Floyd. All of a sudden, everyone just said, "I've never seen protests like this last as long as it has." And I was sitting there when it all started. I started thinking, okay, give this about a week, and it'll end, it'll die down. But no, it's just kept going, and I mean.
Well, you got to understand. Yeah. You got to understand, COVID is helping this out as well. A lot of people are not working; they have nothing to do.
True.
That's why this is prolonging.
No, Rich, you're absolutely right, because there's protests here out on the beach, right?
Yeah.
And these people are mostly peaceful. Now, if you went there wearing a Trump hat, I don't know if they'd be mostly peaceful. But because everyone agrees, so that's the point, Tim. I agree with disagreement, but I don't know if disagreement is what this group is looking for. The fact that everyone was out there on the beach, high-fiving, shaking hands. Hey, this is Brenda. This is Mark. Oh, nice meeting you. All right, we're going to... It's the only social thing that's currently acceptable and state-sanctioned to do. Mm-hmm. This is the hangout that's allowed. There's cities that say you can't have more than 10 people in a room or more than 100 people in a protest. Well, then a protest is just a party that you're allowed to have.
Mm-hmm.
Well, people are I'm sitting there seeing that people are trying to social distance and they are wearing masks.
Excuse me.
But I mean, it is dangerous. I mean, at the end of the day, with this virus, I mean, it's I think you're right. It's sanctioned because it's people are trying to fight for their rights and trying to fight for change, and so I think there's that element of people looking the other way. But at the same time, it's like if you're out there in groups and if you're out there hanging out with people that may have this disease, I mean, you do take a risk no matter what. Whether it's at a Trump rally or whether it's going bowling. I mean, it's one of those. Yeah. So you're taking a risk.
But I just don't like the fact that they try to rip Trump for all this, but people were doing this, for I'm not against their protest, but I'm saying, but they're out there protesting, no masks, this and that. That's just as bad,
I wouldn't have a problem if Trump was having his rally. Hey, he wants to have his political rally, go for it.
Yeah.
I mean, I don't like the fact that he's trying to sit there and say, okay, no social distancing, no masks. He's politicizing.
Yeah,
it.
Okay.
And he's saying, if you wear a mask, you're a pussy. It's like, or you're a liberal phony bastard. It's like,
that I don't
agree with. It's either safe or it's unsafe, and so I think.
Yeah, that's a good point you made. Yeah.
Let's ask him directly. Trump, will you wear a mask?
We'll see what happens.
I can't see George, man. I wish I could see his reaction.
Smiling,
I don't know why he's frozen on my end.
That looks good on my end, so.
That's as long as Tim's got it, that's good. Oh, the issue I guess I have more with the protest is that there's so much. I don't have a problem with protesting, but some of the stuff is not protesting. If you're protesting is a verb, so a protester is a noun based on a verb. So a protester protests. Knocking down a statue is not a protest. Kicking down a gate is not a protest. Beating up a car is not a protest.
No.
You're now committing a different verb. So you're going to be a car kicker. You could call that person a car kicker, but not a protester any longer.
I also feel like this behavior is rewarded. You look like a hero if you're taking down that statue. Like I said, I don't agree with these statues, but I can't go deface somebody's property. There's the proper channels to go through.
Agreed.
Right. If your mentality is break a few eggs to make an omelet, then
But
It's a
sometimes,
revolution. I don't think that's in some ways worth having. I mean, you do so much bad shit on a personal level that why should anyone listen to you on a moral level?
And
you're right. You're right.
On a larger level.
And I think that's why these things happen, where the statues finally got torn down. Because I know people have been frustrated about this, and I've been frustrated because I'm tired of seeing all this. It's like we're still living in the past. These guys with Confederate flags, they want to live in the like. Come on, let's move forward.
But you guys have to realize that, Chris, your example was awesome, and I do get it. But when you have a cold, the only way you have a cold is to know that you have the symptoms. I think protesting is the verb. You're right. But there are symptoms of protesting. There are things that happen when you protest. There's things, not all the time will you have the rules of engagement when it comes to protesting, because you have people that are full of emotion. And these people are usually emotional because they either have some direct tie with it or they believe heavily in it. So if I'm a Black person who has been a victim, which I have, of police brutality, then my emotion is going to be different from someone who's looking at home and saying, what are these people doing? When they have no history of experiencing this. But now when you look at it on an individual level, then you take that from an individual level to a community level. And you say, we all have been victims. Then you take that community level and you take it to a state level, which are many communities, and it says, we all in the state, in our communities. Then you take that from a state level to a country level, and you say, then you are fueled. That's the fuel. So what you're looking at is a symptom of why people do things during a protest that they naturally could not do in regular circumstances, that they've been wishing they were able to do. This statue has been sitting there since my great-great-great-grandfather, who was a slave, my great-great-grandfather saw this statue go up in the name of this Confederate person, and we have been sitting here going by it, knowing that my grandfather's son told me about it. His son, my grandfather's father, told him about it, and he told me about it. So now this history, and now I have an opportunity to take this thing down for not me, but for my emotions and for my history, for my great-great-grandfather, who now remembered that this person was the reason why they could not sit at a lunch counter. Or this person was the reason they couldn't go to a school that was fully booked or fully had great teachers or blah, 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 blah. Right. So this guy right here was the impetus for me not being able to acquire the American dream that my white counterparts have been not only having, but showing me on television, showing me, I mean, in everywhere I go, I see that white people are enjoying this privilege, but I can enjoy it. But yet I work at the same job. I do the same thing. I love my family. I love my wife. I love my children. I want the best thing for my family. But this guy on this statue, so now that's the thing. So, but I get it.
I agree completely with your energy, and that's why I completely agree with the. It's why I mostly agree with the movement. But I think that there's a very dangerous thing happening where the movement the energy is being bottled up and used by some people who care about a lot of other things other than what you just said, and will use all the things you just said as one paragraph in their greater mission statement to get what they want, which is just a different form of political structuring. And it's the reason why I don't mind certain people being on the wrong side of history. I don't think we should put monuments up to them. But if there's no one on the wrong side of history, that means there's never an argument taking place.
Exactly.
And that means conversation is being shut down. And that means that no one's ever pushing back. Look, so Black Lives Matter, the organization right now, if you read what's on their What About Us or What We Believe part of their website, I have it printed out here. I can read it if you want. Some of it is what you just said, which is righteous. And a lot of it is not. And the problem is if you don't push back against that, if everyone just is afraid because the slogan's so good to ever push back and say, hey, there's some things here that don't make fucking sense, then you're going to pander to that group. And the very dangerous thing is if that group, you're not kicking out the crazy elements of that group. Meaning Someone should put up a good defense to this offensive to say, hey, what do you really want and what really matters and what can we all agree on a moral level instead of saying, we'll give you whatever you want no matter what. That's cynical. That's just saying, just have a tantrum, have it out. You deserve to have a tantrum. No.
That's politics, though. We just
right, but that's not happening currently. There's people that are just too scared to say it.
Oh, Chris,
it is true.
It may be true, yes, but it is the political way. You're going to tell me that when you look at that. Give me some chips, man. I heard chips.
sorry, hold on. Technical difficulties. First episode.
What the hell? You got some chips back there? It sounds like barbecue Lays or something, man.
I actually had some low-fat kettle-cooked chips. Don't recommend that.
Low-fat kettles, man. That's the thing of low-fat kettles.
Those protesters tearing down your camera, man.
The Democrats and the Republicans do this all the time.
Correct.
There's so much crap in these bills, and they give and take. They know something. Your flag came down. Your whole thing came down.
You got to burn that flag.
All right.
All right, sorry.
Your flag is behind you. Your flag behind you came down.
First time. Sorry.
Your flag. Get your flag on your back.
Oh, no.
Oh man.
This whole set busted up. Oh, my God.
Only in America.
Only in America. See,
I'm here. I'm sorry, George. I'm sorry.
No, it's all good. No, I'm talking about politics, though. I think this has a lot to do with just politics and how we as a country deal with being able to agree to disagree. It's like it's important that you disagree with some of it. But what we're looking at is the measurement of what the end result is going to be. You're looking at. But when you look at things like this last COVID bill, not this one that they're arguing now, but the one before that, where Trump and the Dems were going back and forth on this COVID bill and realized that I'm going to use this opportunity to put some of my political stuff in this bill.
Yes.
So that you see what I'm saying? It's got
it says omnibus bills. That's the It's such a cynical way to do politics. It's horrible.
And that's how I believe that's how these organizations are built. These organizations are built for political reasons, so that eventually, much like the Tea Party, I don't know if you remember these guys. You remember the Tea Party?
Yeah.
Okay. Remember when we thought for a second that the Tea Party was really going to be an actual party, and then they got infiltrated by the Republicans, and then they tore them down because they realized that, oh shit, we're in trouble. These Tea Party people are really making a difference. You see, and that's the give and take of these political parties, like Black Lives Matter comes up, and all of a sudden, all the Black Lives Matter has to do is enter into the political realm, and now we're going to have a big problem, because if Black Lives Matter says to vote this person, God forbid they do it, because that's when the organization is going to end.
Right.
Black Lives Matter will not be an organization anymore the minute they step into the whole political realm. They need to stay in the nonprofit, work in this organization, because if they decide to take a political position, then they will be too infiltrated and eventually brought to their knees, because what you can't do is mess with the political structure of this country. It's a two-party system. They need it to stay that way.
Mm-hmm. Let me ask you this, George. What do you think about defunding the police?
I think that's crazy. I'm not into defunding. I'm into reform.
Yeah.
There you go. That's a better,
that's the thing, though, George. That's the thing. I think that most people are in your situation, and I think that most people have not read what this group is fully about, and that's fine if you want to turn an eye and use the group as a vehicle. I think you're being more honest in admitting that it is somewhat of a political party, but some of the stuff the group believes is crazy. I mean, they use the word comrade 2 times in their What We Believe. They do. I have it right here.
Sorry.
They have...
Chris.
Well, we practice empathy. We engage comrades with the intent to learn about and connect with contexts. We disrupt the Western prescribed nuclear family structure requirement by supporting each other's families as villages that collectively care for one another, especially our children, to the degree that mothers, parents, children are comfortable. That could mean so many freaking things.
But that's the whole thing, Chris. These are the people that we're talking about that are now taking the movement, right? Taking this Black Lives movement, and now are using the momentum of this movement for their own narrative.
No, dude, they started the movement. These are the founders admit that they're Marxists, that they use Marxist tactics, that they're trained Marxists. I mean, that's fine if someone supports that, but I don't think anyone knows that. I don't think anyone has read what's on their actual website.
But the whole point is no, I'm for reform. But however, Richard, I am for threatening. Don't get me wrong. I will threaten to defund you. Absolutely. Because what you need to understand is there's going to be repercussions for your actions or your non-actions. And that's what the police are infamous for. They love to create these committees where they're going to do this and do that. But their committees are not only governed by themselves, they are ordained by themselves. They put the people on the committee. They actually govern the committee, and so the findings of the committee are going to be quite obvious. Mm-hmm. So I am definitely for threatening defunding, but I am not necessarily for defund. I'm for reform of the police, and it's going to take generations. It's not going to start here. It's not going to end here. It's going to take generations.
Yeah, I think the term defund the
art of the deal is what you just mentioned. The art of the deal.
The art of the deal.
Threaten, and then get what you really want.
Well, I think the term defund the police was
Trump way. It's a Trump way.
Yeah. Well, I think the term,
sometimes you become like your enemy.
I read that book, by the way.
Yeah.
And remember, like I always say, Trump was cool up until he was president. Don't get me wrong. He was a cool dude up until he was president. And then when he became president, then everybody started going crazy, But again.
Well, yeah, I mean, he smelled blood in the water and put an R next to his name. But if he put a D next to his name, you would have heard him BSing about Medicare for all. Am I right, folks? I mean, what's going on, dude? Let's get this rolling. What's it? Sorry, Tim. What were we saying?
Well, I mean, I think the term defund the police was a bad term. And the problem is you had the Trumpians who capitalized on it, saying, "Oh, what are you gonna do? Defund the police?" It's like, what's gonna happen if a burglar comes into your house? And it's like, well, it had nothing to do with that. It was supposed to be reform. It was supposed to be demilitarize them, not take away some of their funding, but take away some of their responsibilities. They don't need to be. You don't need to have a guy with a gun come into your house when it just requires counseling or it requires something with a softer touch. And I think that's.
If someone comes into Richard's house, though, I want them to be carrying a gun.
Well, that's different, yeah.
But you gotta. I totally agree with you, Tim, on that. I mean, I think the police haven't been trained well. I think their hiring tactics. It's so easy to get hired onto these police departments. Yeah. It doesn't take much. A lot of these guys are out of shape. I see these. Right. You should have some kind. You should physical test every year. You have to maintain a certain weight.
Right. A
lot of this stuff, I think a lot of that would solve a lot of these issues. I see two cops on one guy and they can't handle him. I'm like,
it's a good point.
It's
a good point. The other thing too, I mean, I keep hearing about people will say, "Oh, we need to do psychological testing, or we need to find out, don't hire rape." How do you determine that? I mean, how can you determine what? I mean, somebody knows the answers to give during an interview. You know the politically correct answers to give. How do you sit there and what question can you ask during an interview that says, "Oh, well, what do you think of this, and this?" And it's like, "Oh, I think of this." "Oh, you're a racist then."
What's happened that it's because adults did not want to. No adult in good conscience wants to destroy another adult's life, especially someone they know, regardless of the differences. So it's the same problem that happened with Larry Nassar with the girls with the gymnast situation, right? There were little red flags, but people were like, I don't think that's true. I hope that's not true. Moving on.
Right.
Yeah.
I think on a lesser level, that happens with the cops. In that, he had a bad day. He's not a bigot. And if that happens 10 times and it keeps getting thrown under the rug, then what you have is a situation in where there are only a few bad apples, but there's only a few bad apples that remain and get more rotten. Mm-hmm. And that bad apple could be bitten into by the society or bite into the society multiple times,
right,
over the course of a long time.
And you're absolutely right. But the reality is, and I'm not being dramatic, but it's been a recipe for disaster. And I'm going to use a reference recipe. Now, I know my good friend, Chris, he's Italian. Okay? Let me ask you a question. Your grandmother had a recipe. I know she had a recipe, and she probably got it from her grandmother. How would she feel if you got her recipe as she was cooking it, and you said, we need to add this. What was
Oh
she?
no! I wasn't even allowed. If she even if it wasn't like a Sunday, if I started up the grill just to like cook a grilled cheese or something, the stove, I hear her say, "What's that noise?" And I'd say, "Nothing." And then I'd hear her walk over. She had one fake leg, so she'd be like, one fake knee. What's going on in there? Nothing. My goal was to get that pan in the sink before she made it to the kitchen.
Yes. So
that would be sacrilege to touch her stuff. That would be like instant. Like you get hit with the spoon.
So when you're looking at old footage, I wouldn't even say of the civil rights movement. You can look at even old footage beyond that. You look at old footage of how police, with the recipe that they've used over the years in handling black people. I'm asking you to understand exactly what your grandmother. Imagine someone coming, trying to change the recipe.
Right.
Deal with these people. And I'm being very dramatic, but that is the mentality.
Be dramatic.
But that is the mentality that cops all over this country have been inundated with when they come on the force. Both black, white, Jew, Gentile, it doesn't matter. Because once you join it, you become a part of the culture. So when you're looking at a movie like Boys in the Hood, and that movie shows the cops dealing with another black kid and he's black, you understand that right there, he looks at the kid and says, "What are you, a Crip?" And you feel that. And I know I did. Even when I saw the movie for the first time, it didn't matter that the cop was black. It didn't matter. He was a cop and he represented something that had a recipe that was way back before him, but he was cooking it and he decided to eat it and he wanted to be a part of it. And that was his choice. So I don't have a problem understanding that if this whole idea of the recipe, it's a disaster. There's a recipe for disaster. This is how I describe the entire police department. And that's why I say it needs to be reformed. And that's why I say that it's going to take generations because you have to, it's in the fibers. It's in the fibers. It's hard to get a stain out of the fibers of something. It's in the fibers of how this culture, the police department, has been controlling black people over the last 50, 60, 80 years since the police department was
the concern, I guess. No, I understand completely what you're saying. The concern, I guess, is that in being hypersensitive into the actions of cops, you might beat them back to where crime returns, and then this ideology will only be listened to and appreciated by people for so long until their own places get dangerous, and then there's going to be a hard wave of law and order coming in. And because my uncle's a ex-cop and NYPD, and he said there's I don't know if he created the concept, but he told me it was really fascinating. He said there's a clock, a pendulum, like and a big old clock. There's a pendulum of crime, and the way it kind of works is that crime gets really bad to the point where it becomes desperate, and society kind of says, "All right, cops, go do what you got to do." And then crime gets beaten back so that things return to a middle ground. But now you have an infrastructure of where cops are on the offensive and growing. Now cops start to police little things. They start to police parking tickets and little things that piss people off. Now everything becomes illegal. Now little crimes start happening. Little crimes start growing. The police departments have become so big that cracks are in the seam. There's certain things they won't police, or there's certain crimes that you could do that you get away with. Crime returns. Now we're back at the middle ground. Now crime starts to get out of hand. Organized crime starts to return. Crime starts to be more in control of people's lives than law and order. And then it starts swinging. And it goes every 15, 20 years, 25 years. It goes like that. And I think that might be happening simultaneously to this movement, which has righteous elements. And that's the scary part for people.
What scares me the most, people are going to take the law into their own hands. And that's what I don't want to see. And that's what it's going to come to.
That'll be a lot less just.
Like, defund the police. No. Like George said, we got to reform. You got to train these guys better. They're only good as how you train them. If you tell somebody to do a certain way, you're supposed to,
I mean, I understand
like
what George is saying when he's saying it's widespread, but the great thing about having representational government and little things is just as bad ideas could spread department to department, good ideas could spread too. If you look into the town next to you and they have good policies, then those could also be adopted. Like the fact that we don't have one centralized, all cops must act this way, might be helpful in terms of like trial and error in this. I don't know.
It's like when you get pulled over for a car, it's your insurance. You already know if I have insurance or not because it comes in the computer system. It's like, why do you have to ask me for all, Or if I get pulled over, tell me what I did, give me my ticket, I'll be on my way. Then a little ticket turns into something bigger, I just don't understand that.
George, are you still there? I think you're frozen up.
No, I'm still here.
Okay.
I'm still here. I'm just listening, guys.
Right.
I'm just listening.
Cool.
Rich, how many times have the cops pulled you over and said, "Please, sir, please take that joint out of your mouth before you hand over the insurance"?
But it's legal. It's legal.
Yes.
Still didn't answer the question, George. I mean,
That's it. It's legal.
I'm glad that we're having the conversation because I feel like currently, especially here in Los Angeles, there's just people afraid to have the conversation. And I think Adam Carolla had a good tweet about it. He said, "It's time to have an honest conversation about race. You're right, but you start because I don't want to get fired."
Yeah.
And it's like, if the movement is gaining ground through fear, people being in trouble if they don't fully on board with it, or because they can't push back against the worst elements of it, then we're not creating a better society. We're just creating an equal society in the different direction, and we're just creating subcultures in a different way that are going to bubble up in 25 years from now.
well, we should.
Yeah.
Go ahead.
I wanted to ask you guys, if you guys want to finish on this, I want to go back to COVID.
Yeah, we're over an hour now. So
Can I do my nerdy rant at one point?
Yeah.
Or let's just
Preach on, Chris.
Go on, Rich.
Go ahead, Rich.
Okay, the COVID. I mean, this is really bad.
But not the COVID. It's just COVID.
And it's not COVID Cola, Richard. Stop calling it that.
And it's COVID-19.
I just don't know what. I'm not really worried about the disease. What worries me the most is what the future holds for the country. We can't go back to work, but then the government doesn't want to give us money. I was like, what other options do we have?
Dude, it's going to get bad later.
They're telling us on the media, oh yeah, you have to stay home, you have to social distance. But it's like, bro, I need to make money as well. I got family to feed. Who's going to give me the money? Or, But that's why I get upset about our government. And our government will go overseas to these countries, give you all these people these money, and it's like when it comes to us, oh, here's $1,200, and you guys should, like, what?
It's true. If we got out of Afghanistan and stopped lining the pockets of those private contractors who are building McDonald's there or whatever the hell they're doing, I mean, we'd have a lot more than 1,200.
No, just give it to us now, just so we can get through this, and
This virus has exposed every issue that we have in the country.
Yeah. I mean, when we first started staying at home, I was sitting there watching my 401k tank, and I was worried. I was like sitting there going, I want to stay home. I want to do my part. I don't want people to die. I want people to stay healthy, but I also want to be able to retire and not have to be a greeter at Walmart when I'm 65. I want, there's certain necessities. I want to be able to pay my bills. I want to be able to do these things. And it would be great if the government could step up and provide us a stimulus check every month while we were doing this instead of debating.
I think it is
what it is.
Yeah,
I think Tim would be a Costco greeter. I don't think he'd be a Walmart greeter.
Yeah,
checking
that's true. I could see that. I could see that.
With your military background, that works well.
They pay better.
Yeah. Costco. Definitely Costco. Thank you, Tim. Costco.
Sorry.
By the way, full disclosure, I have stock in Costco. So.
Oh.
Yeah.
Full disclosure, I'm afraid to check my 401k. Haven't looked at it for years. Have no clue what happened after the virus. Might be poor right now. Don't know.
All right.
Yeah.
So Richard, was that all? Was that what you wanted? The point you wanted to make? Otherwise, we're going to go into. Go ahead. Go into Chris's rant. We gotta wrap this up. We're going into an hour or so, guys. It's been a great talk. I guess what we could do is just call it the lunchbox rant. Or the lunchbox.
What's in my lunchbox?
No.
What's in my lunchbox?
How about the lunchbox hurl? You see, just hurl all over the lunchbox. Get it all out. Just fuck it. Just let it out, man.
Let me dig through my lunchbox and find this rant. Oh wait, there's my yoo-hoo tuna fish. Oh wait, here we go.
There we go.
I just found my stand too.
Oh.
Follow for next week.
Yeah.
No, I have the one that you can adjust. It's right by my bed.
Thank you.
Yeah,
all right. Go ahead, Chris.
Okay, this is so random and not very much in line what we talked about, but I wrote it out and I felt passionately about it a day ago. So here we go. All right, no, I'm joking. Okay, my rant today is about Terminator, the state of the franchise.
Oh my God, poor thing. I'm so sorry. I'm so sorry for your loss.
After the flop of Terminator Dark Fate, it got me thinking. Why would you try to remake T2? It's a perfect action film with a complicated plot, and it's still popular. Any attempt to copy its formula would instantly be compared and torn apart. Why not just focus on where it all started, on the themes of the often glanced over Terminator 1? For all of T2's themes of man versus machine, on screen we are seeing a machine versus machine spectacle. It's a latter Godzilla movie, one where the audience has a monster on their side. But T1 is much more carnal than this. Darkly lit, with streetlights bleeding through fog, an ominous score to match a panicked mood, and a touch of sexuality, it feels very much like It Follows, where there's an uncaring, unstoppable force coming directly for you, and it will not stop until it drains you of your humanity. It's a very simple concept. You are vulnerable. There is something stronger than you could ever be. You are not a superhero. You're a human being with desires and frustrations and failures and hope. The Terminator franchise is currently suffering from a dark fate of its own. It's hard to make a film about humans fighting machines when the characters feel less and less human, and the product has become increasingly mechanical, sterile, and robotically corporate. The newest offering seems to have come off a Cyberdyne production line. Hopefully studios can course correct on the disconnect with audiences. Hopefully the films of this new decade will go back to art imitating life. If so, these new films will have to critically reflect on the role corporations are having in our day-to-day lives, and how that could affect our human interaction in the long run. That seems improbable given who owns these properties. But if we don't do that, if life starts to imitate art as it currently stands, I'm not sure what that means for the future of humanity. Remember, there is no fate but what we make.
Thank you.
That's my rant. That has nothing to do with anything we talked about.
Wow. Well, you know what?
Well written, sir.
Listen. That was a great rant. And Chris, can you do one of those once a week? Because
I can. I could also
be
more topical if that helps.
That came from the heart. I can hear.
It did. I mean,
I'll call that the monthly rant or the weekly
rant.
Don't get me started on Star Wars, man.
Okay. All right. Well,
that's why I thought about comparing the two, because Disney. Yeah. How could they make a movie about fighting the evil empire when they kind of are seen as that? And I think that's the problem.
Yeah. Right. Well, that was phenomenal. That was phenomenal. And now, should we all do a rant, or is it because my rants won't be nearly as thought out as his? I can already tell you. But
I don't think we have enough time.
I think I'll save it for next week.
Good idea.
Chris got to do some research.
Next week I'll do a rant on COVID and Black Lives Matter. Just to prove that I wasn't being topical.
I'll keep you guys updated on the news.
Yeah. Well, you guys,
current events.
This was a great first episode of the American Lunchbox Podcast. Well, are we gonna do this once a week, or we're gonna do this once a month? We'll decide. We'll let you guys know. But you are in tune with Mastro, Taylor,
Timar, whatever. Call me Taylor.
Jeff, and Richard, and no one called me Battle this whole time. Everybody called me George. So
battle.
Battle.
That's Dave, which is fine. Who cares? I'm an open book anyway.
Right.
But anyway, guys, it's been fun.
All right.
We'll see you guys next time on American Lunchbox Podcast.
Ooh.
All right. Later.
Happy 4th of July.
Happy 4th of July 2020. Happy
Everybody
4th
be safe.
2020. All right, guys.
Be safe.
All right.
Bye.